All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll get started in maybe a few minutes just to let everybody in. Okay. We'll start at around 12:02 maybe, just so that everyone can log on to our meeting. Thank you again for joining. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Solar Utilities Reporting Guidance and Education Surge webinar. We are here to share important information with you all regarding Assembly Bill 2143 and Public Utilities Code Section 769.2, which includes compliance requirements for solar contractors with projects subject to these statutes. Per suggestions made at last month's webinar, we made some changes to help clarify these requirements for solar contractors. Now, before we get started, I would like to hand it over to the Department of Industrial Relations, Labor Commissioner's Office to go over the disclaimer slide.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Brown. I'm from the Labor Commissioner's Office. This is a quick disclaimer we do before all of our outreach events. Just letting you know that this presentation is intended to summarize relevant portions of the Labor Code for educational purposes. It's not intended to be legal advice. It's not meant to guarantee any outcome of enforcement or coverage proceedings. The opinions expressed are not necessarily the official position of the Department of Industrial Relations, the director. Thank you so much. Back to you, Brittany.
Thank you, Sarah. Here are the ground rules for this webinar. The webinar is being recorded and will be sent out to registered participants. Mics will be muted and video will be disabled throughout the webinar to avoid and minimize background noise and distraction as the speakers are presenting. For questions, please utilize the Q&A feature that is available. After we get through all the content, we will have dedicated time for Q&A. Additionally, please keep in mind to be respectful to other participants and presenters. Our webinar is designed to facilitate collaboration, and it is important to maintain a respectful and professional atmosphere throughout. For today's agenda, we will be covering an overview on AB 2143 and PUC 769.2. Then we will go into the Labor Commissioner's Office information slides, and finally, we will wrap it up with CPUC and Surge Initiative information slides. Here are the presenters for today. From the California Public Utilities Commission, we have Amber Murakami Fester. Representing the Surge team, we have Sylvia Lin and Ariana Fernandez. And from the DIR Labor Commissioner's Office, we have Sarah Brown and Eric Raktiprakorn. Thank you to all the speakers for being here today. Now I'm going to hand it over to Amber to get us started.
All right, thank you, Brittany. My name is Amber Murakami Fester. I am the program manager for items related to AB 2143 at the CPUC. I've been working closely with my colleague Sarah Lerhopt, who's also a regulatory analyst on the team, on the rollout of these processes. We've been working very closely with GCAP Services, also known as the Surge team here, to roll out the website and get the payroll records collection process up and running, which they will run through in this presentation. So just wanted to say a quick thank you to the Surge team as well as the DIR's Labor Commissioner's Office for their work and cooperation for both this webinar, but also for their work outside of the webinar as well. With With this slide, I wanted to give a quick legislative overview of AB 2143. It was passed in 2022 and went into effect in January of this year, establishing the Public Utilities Code 769.2. And this code requires payment of prevailing wages for construction workers, as well as apprentices who are working on large customer-sited renewable electrical generation facilities, solar or otherwise, and any associated battery storage that enroll in tariffs designed for these projects. So those include, for example, the NEM or NVT tariffs, but include several others as well. These two links at the bottom are meant to be resources for those who want to dig into the legislation itself for reference. You can click on the links once the slides are shared out. The one on the left is the prevailing wage page on the CPUC website. We'll be posting updates there as they come up, and then the one on the right is the actual text of the bill. So hopefully that can be useful to people. Yeah, with that, I will hand it back over to the Surge team.
Thanks, Amber. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Ariana Fernandez, the Senior Labor Compliance Analyst here at the Surge team with GCAP. We wanted to include this little excerpt of AB 2143, so I'm going to kind of read it off here. So it states, existing law imposes various requirements on public works projects as defined, including a requirement that at minimum, all workers employed on a public works project be paid the general prevailing wage rate of per diem wages for work of a similar character in the locality in which a public work is performed. It then goes on to say this bill would apply those public works projects requirements to the construction of any renewable electrical generation facility and any associated battery storage after December 31st, 2023. Then the rest of the bill goes into the projects that would fall under this requirement. So we just wanted to highlight that as part of the AB 2143 excerpt. So next slide, please, Brittany. Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to delve into some of these requirements per AB 2143 and Public Utilities Code 769.2. So the first would be to pay construction workers and apprentices the prevailing wage rates for the work that they are performing. Contractors would also be required to maintain and verify payroll records and make those records available for inspection and copying, as well as submit digital copies of the certified payroll records to the CPUC biannually on July 1st and December 31st of each year. These requirements are all contractors are subject to these requirements, as well as any subcontractors or lower tier contracts that may arise. And next slide, please. And projects that do qualify as eligible if they involve a customer-sited renewable electrical generation facility or any associated battery storage. Projects that AB 2143 will not apply to are residential facilities that will have a maximum generating capacity of 15 kilowatts or less, or that will be installed on a single family home. Projects that are already a public work under existing law, and facilities that serve only a modular home community, or multi-unit housing that has 2 or few stories. So what are certified payroll records exactly? So Labor Code Section 1776B requires that the payroll records must be certified, meaning they must be accompanied by a signed statement of compliance. This statement of compliance is a written declaration made under penalty of perjury stating that all of the information contained in the records is true and correct. For additional information regarding certified payroll reports, you can also reference Section 3.1.1 of the Public Works Manual, which we will be sharing the link after the webinar. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Sylvia Lynn from our team.
Thank you, Ariana, and welcome everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for participating today. So going into this slide, this illustrates all of the different participants in the process that has just been described to you by Amber and by Ariana. So the process actually begins at the IOU level, so the investor-owned utility. So that's going to be PG&E, SCE, and SDGE. So the first step in the process we call part of the pre-construction phase. And you're going to contact the applicable utility company and submit that interconnection application. And what they're going to provide that is pursuant to the terms of AB 2143 is an AB 2143 checklist. And what that's going to do is kind of verify the eligibility of the project that you're going to be performing, as well as a disclosure form that is going to outline the specific requirements under AB 2143. And that's going to entail everything that's required under a public works project with respect to prevailing wage and related obligations. And at that point, you will wait the review and approval of that application. And once the permission is granted to operate and access the tariff, if the payroll records are compliant, and that's the key here, is that tariff will be contingent upon payroll records being compliant, meaning they have been submitted biannually, July 1st and December 31st, and contain all the requisite information. So the utilities not only are the first step in the process, so that will be ongoing. So a lot of these are not necessarily going to be all executed at the beginning, but will be ongoing, and we'll be working with in terms of the different, the DIR and Surge will be working in coordination with each other throughout the process. So before you actually go into the Surge system, which is part of the CPUC here, you'll need to register with the DIR. So this is standard with all public works projects. So you will fill out an online form, pretty much a one-page form, very straightforward. And afterwards, you will be assigned a DIR registration number for you as the contractor. And then pursuant to the DIR requirements and the associated labor code provisions, making sure that you pay prevailing wage amounts to what we call the qualified workers and apprentices. So qualified workers, and we'll go into this in a little bit more detail later in the presentation, mean those that are subject to prevailing wage, trades classification subject to prevailing wage. And then you'll be submitting your certified payroll reports to the DIR. And we'll go in that as well. We'll go into a little bit more detail in terms of the requirement to submit both to the DIR as well as to Surge. And from a customer operational standpoint, just with the DIR, ensuring that the certified payroll records are compliant. They are reviewed by the DIR to ensure compliance. And then the DIR, being the enforcement agency, they have the authority to issue any necessary violation-related penalties if there should be an underpayment or the documentation is not provided in a timely or complete manner. Now, once you have a DIR contractor registration, at that point, you'll be ready to go into the Surge system, which is part of the CPUC, and you'll register yourself as a contractor there as well. So there is a DIR registration component as well as a Surge registration component. So in order to register with Surge, you'll need your contractor state license number, the CSLB, as well as your DIR number. You'll be submitting copies of that certified payroll, again, biannually, July 1st, December 31st, for all performance periods. And then copy of the certified payroll are going to be archived with the CPUC for 5 years. So that's pursuant to AB 2143. So hopefully this kind of gives you a summary and high-level overview of all the different participants in the process and what the general steps will be for compliance. And next slide, please. And as was discussed on the previous slide, your records are going to be submitted. There are compliance requirements on both the DIR side as well as the Surge side. So that is going to be pursuant to Public Utilities Code Section 769.2. Just quickly, I want to describe the relationship if we're mentioning the AB 2143 versus the Public Utilities Code. Essentially the same thing. It is the Public Utilities Code is what we call the codified version of AB 2143 and specifically lays forth the requirements for submission of certified payroll on the biannual basis and pursuant to the Labor Code section, submitting those certified payroll reports to the DIR. So one is through the Surge portal. So that is an independent web-based application, and then with the DIR through their eCPR system. And again, we'll be describing that in a little bit more detail as we get into the webinar here today. And you'll have the opportunity to ask questions as well at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. So the IOU reporting requirements, again, this is pretty much what we talked about in that first slide that I addressed. So that would be the investor-owned utility reporting, so the utility company reporting. And just to restate again, it's the first step in the process, because without that interconnection application, you really can't go any further. That has the project that you're going to be working on needs to be verified by the respective utility that it is an eligible project under AB 2143. So they're going to do that through a series of questions that they ask you, and then providing you with the disclosure forms. So as the contractor, you're going to complete that application that is given to you by the IOU. Again, they're going to provide you with they're going to walk through a checklist with various questions, and that's going to establish the applicability. Because if the project you're on is not applicable under AB 2143, then these requirements will not apply. So we want to make sure to validate that at the beginning, and that's what the IOU will be doing. After they review the checklist, then they confirm the applicability, and then if you are eligible under AB 2143, you'll be provided with that disclosure form where you're going to acknowledge receipt of having received this information of what the requirements, what the responsibilities are under the AB 2143 in terms of prevailing wage and payroll submission. And with that, it's my pleasure to turn this over to the DIR for the next series of slides.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. So once again, my name is Sarah. I am a deputy with the Labor Commissioner's Office. Today, my colleague Eric and I are going to go over some applicable compliance requirements from the DIR for your AB 2143 projects. These include project registration, contractor registration, the payment of prevailing wages, apprenticeship requirements, and maintaining and submitting certified payroll records. We also have a link to our website on this slide, and I really recommend that you make use of that as a resource if you haven't already. We have a lot of great guides and tutorials and frequently asked questions there. It's a really great resource to have if you'll be working on public works projects. Next slide, please. So when we talk about public works, it is codified in the Labor Code as work that is done under contract, paid in full or in part by public funds. And then we further define those types of work as construction, alteration, demolition, installation, repair, and maintenance. Next slide, please. It's also important to note that when we talk about construction, that also includes pre-construction activities such as design, site assessments, feasibility studies, inspection, land surveying, and it also includes post-construction activities such as cleanup. Next slide, please. The first compliance requirement we will talk about today is Public Works project registration, which is the responsibility of the awarding body. The awarding body is the entity that awards a contract for public works and is sometimes also known as the project owner, and it's the awarding body's responsibility to register the project. Next slide, please. So here's an excerpt from the Labor Code about project registration. The Labor Code states an awarding body must provide electronic notice to DIR of all public works contracts within 30 days of the award, but in no event later then the first day in which a contractor has workers employed upon the public work. When it says provide electronic notice, that just refers to using our project registration system to register the project. You'll also notice here with this asterisk that we do have what we call the small project exemption. And that means that project registration requirements actually do not apply to projects with a total value of $25,000 or less for construction, alteration, demolition, installation, or repair work, or projects that are $15,000 or less for maintenance work. Projects that are that small do not have the project registration requirements. Next slide, please. Project registration takes place on our website. This is that Public Works homepage that we saw the URL for a few slides ago. Project registration can be found on the right-hand side of the page under Resources, under the heading Registration. It's that second link there, Project Registration. Now, our registration services are currently in the process of being modernized. We have a very big update coming this summer. That should be really exciting. It should make our systems a lot easier to use. So in the interest of time today and with that upcoming update, we're not going to be doing a step-by-step project registration tutorial because that information would very quickly be out of date with the new system. But what's most important to know is where to find project registration on our website. That's going to have all the information that you'll need to register your projects. All right, next slide, please. Okay. To find a Public Works project once it is registered, you will be able to use our project registration search engine, which is also located on our website under Resources, under the heading Search. It's that very first link, Find Public Works Projects. You can search projects by all sorts of criteria like the project name or the awarding body, and it's a really wonderful resource to have. Next slide, please. So in addition to project registration, we also require contractor registration for public works projects. Anyone who bids on or enters into a contract to perform work that requires the payment of prevailing wages is considered a public works contractor. So this includes subcontractors who have entered into a contract with another contractor to perform a portion of work on a public works project. It also includes sole proprietors and brokers who are responsible for performing work on a public works project, even if they do not have employees or will not use their own employees to perform the work. Anybody who fits the definition of a public works contractor is required to register with the DIR as a contractor. Next slide, please. A few facts about contractor registration. It costs $400 and it follows the fiscal year, July 1st through June 30th. So we are currently approaching the end of the 2023-2024 fiscal year. If you anticipate working on public works projects for a while, you can register for up to 3 fiscal years at a time. Important to note that registrations are valid per legal entity. So if you have an active registration and your organization changes legal entity type, you will need to create a new registration and get a new registration number for your new legal entity. Additionally, please be aware contractors are liable for penalties for working on public works projects without an active registration. So you'll certainly want to make sure that everybody has an active registration before working on any public works projects. Next slide. Just like project registration, contractor registration can be found on our website under Resources on the right-hand side of the page. Under the registration heading, it's that first link, contractor registration, right above project registration. And I'm going to pass it over to Eric to continue talking about compliance requirements.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eric. I'm an investigator in the Public Works Unit, and I'll be covering prevailing wages. So in general, with this new bill, we're considering these types of projects for renewable energy to be public works. So part of the requirements for public works is that contractors on public works projects pay prevailing wage. Conceptually, the best way to explain California prevailing wage is that it's a type of minimum wage, but specifically for these types of public works projects. And prevailing wage is determined by the director of the DIR. And essentially, there determined, they're more organized by the type of work being performed. So we call this the craft or classification, and also the location of the project, which would be generally the county of the project. Prevailing wages, they're usually based on collective bargaining agreements. Because of AB 2143, which designates these types of projects as public works projects, apprenticeship requirements will apply. So the following slides that you're about to see are going to cover prevailing wages and apprenticeship. Can we move on to the next slide, please? So when it comes to prevailing wages, when you're researching your correct wage determination, you need to have a couple of elements. And this is essentially the visual that kind of demonstrates the trajectory that you're going to take. So you need your contract date. It also says bid date there because usually when it comes to public works projects, there is a bidding process, but for these types of projects under this new assembly bill, it's going to be a little bit different. So there will probably at least be a contract date. So with the contract dates, you'll need the determination effective dates. This will lead you to determining what county this work is being performed in, and of course, what class or craft that you need for this wage determination. You can find more about these requirements under Labor Code 1771, 1774, and 1813. We can move on to the next slide. So what classification? I think this is going to be a pretty popular topic. So as previously stated, the prevailing wage rates are set by the Office of Director. And one thing to note about these prevailing wage rates is that the Office of Director is a unit that responds to any request for advisement. So if you have a sort of public works project, you're not completely familiar with the types of classifications that are required to perform the work, or if you just want to be absolutely sure and you want to have some kind of response on record that you can use a certain type of work, then you want to reach out to the Office of Director Research Unit. In short, the Office of Director Research Unit, they're also referred to as the Office of Policy Research and Legislation, or OPRL for short. They're the ones who research and publish these wage determinations. So when you look up a wage determination, it's going to include the breakdown for the basic hourly rate that is paid directly to the worker, the fringes that can be paid directly to the worker or to a third party, and the training fund associated with that specific craft that either goes to the worker if the craft is not apprenticeable, or to the CAC if the craft is apprenticeable, or an approved apprentice program. So basically, when you're looking up your wage determinations, it's going to include that breakdown. It's going to include the scope of work. It'll include travel and subsistence. All of these materials, you want to make sure that you familiarize yourself with, or at least print them out when you find your correct determination and classification, because these requirements differ depending on the type of work being done, depending on the classification that we're talking about. So going back to Office of Policy, Research, and Legislation, we have the information here in the visual on the right. So 415-703-4774. But I think, for your purposes as a public works contractor, it's probably best to email them, because at the very least, you're going to get a response in writing, which is a lot more comforting than, reporting to an investigator and saying that you had a phone conversation, which wasn't on record. At the very least, if you submit a request in writing, you'll get something in writing back that you can use for, just for a paper trail. And of course, the statistics unit, for them to respond, using or what classification should be used on a public works project is not necessarily an easy, quick response question. So you want to provide them as much information as possible. The minimum is your name, your company name or agency name, email, mailing address, phone number, a summary of your questions, the bid advertisement date, craft, classifications, county, location of the project. So if you need their advisement, you want to be as clear as possible with them. You're not limited to the criteria that you see there, but at the very least, you want to at least include the criteria that you see on this slide. We can move on to the next slide. So certified payroll records. Basically on contractors on public works projects are obligated to maintain and furnish certified payroll records. These forms include the ideal form, which is EM 131. But you're also required to report certified payroll records electronically. So that's through our system. and also, as I understand, Surge's system as well. So these ECPRs, this visual that you're looking at here, these requirements are derived from Labor Codes 1776 and 1771.4. But the main thing to keep in mind is that certified payroll records are essentially supposed to demonstrate how you paid your workers based on how many hours they worked on the project, also what classification. So when you look at the A131 form, and we do have an example coming up, the A131 form is very clear. It lists all the basic information that is specified in Labor Code 1776. As it stands right now, the current ECPR form that we have is not exhaustive. It's more of an administrative duty that you're submitting these monthly, right? So the ECPRs, depending on what format that you use, will not be as clear as the 1776 A131 form. And we're going to get to that in the next few slides. Next slide, please. So the ECPRs, in general, if you're using manual entry, right, it's going to have less information. So we have a visual here of a drawn apple versus an actual photographed real apple. So that's the main issue with ECPRs that are reported through manual entry. They are not as clear and they don't give a full picture of what's going on the project. For example, if I'm an investigator and I want to make sure that your workers are being paid correctly, ECPRs aren't really going to show me too much because they're not going to show enough information. If you want to be very clear and meet the requirements as specified in Labor Code 1776, you can look up the A131 form, which is representative of the photograph of the real apple. So we can move on to the next slide. So this is the example reporting form. It's ideally what we asked for. And you can see that this is a very detailed form. On the left, you see name, address, social security number of the employee. And then going on, you can see the work classification. You can see the hours worked each day. And you can see a breakdown of not only deductions, but fringes towards the right, as well as a check number. So these are, so just in case it isn't clear, this information, this criteria is sourced directly from Labor Code 1776. So that basically gives us a much more clear idea of what actually happened on this project, how many hours this worker was working, what work they performed, and also their hourly rate of pay, and how are they paid, direct deposit, check number. So this information is very essential to report on the certified payroll record. We can move on to the next slide. So part of certified payroll records is obviously the certification. So what's acceptable for a certification for certified payroll records is that there's language that you're certifying under penalty of perjury, that the records that you're filling out are accurate, right? So this is kind of a declaration that goes along with your submitted payroll records, and that's what makes them certified. So this is example, this is part of the A131 format. We can move on to the next slide. So this is an example of what it looks like currently for our electronic certified payroll records. Right now, this is what's called manual entry. So you can see by comparison that there's not enough information. The employee's name, social security number is only about like the last 4 digits. And then there's no information about address. There's no information about whether the worker was working on other projects in addition to this one, or the way that they're being paid. So this is an administrative duty. It's supposed to be, conveying the general day-to-day that's going on. But when it comes to an actual review, this type of certified payroll record is not going to cut it. You have to rely on a format that is either the A131 form or a format that has the same criteria that's on the A131 form. And going back to what Sarah said, we are also updating the electronic certified payroll records. So it's not gonna look like this per se in a couple of weeks. Basically, what we have done is we've heard a lot of the issues that are currently going on with our certified payroll records that we've heard from contractors. So we're working to improve it. Ideally, I believe the objective is to make them more similar or even identical to the A131 form, so there is just one form, but basically we are moving towards that stage. So you're not, depending on when you engage in these projects, you may not see this type of electronic certified payroll record once these systems debut. But in general, the same goes for any other type of payroll records. So the A131 form, ideal, it represents 1776. Other forms, you need to make sure that they at least represent what's on the A131 form. Going off the top of my head, the Department of Labor Davis-Bacon forms, we wouldn't consider those compliant because they don't have the same information as the A131 form. So basically, if you receive your request from our office for certified payroll records, you want to make sure that it is at least identical to the A131 form, or more directly, it references all the criteria that's in Labor Code 1776. We can move on to the next slide. So this is for the trainings that we have. So I believe this is for DIR. So basically, we understand that there's a high skill ceiling for being a public works contractor, especially if you're coming in new to this, right? So we do have a lot of training coming up, and the nearest one is June 6, 2024. We host them in addition to our stakeholders, so it's co-hosted. My colleagues, I believe, for example, the contractor responsibilities that you've seen, right? My colleagues, Dana and Amaris, they present very well. They have their own much more detailed presentation for public works contractors. So if you're not completely familiar at the end of this presentation, we definitely recommend, attending these seminars. They're free of charge. They're online. So you'll be able to get copies of those slides and become more familiar with requirements under public works. Next slide.
Well, thank you, Eric and Sarah. And I'll go ahead now and tell you a little bit about the CPUC Surge site. So you just heard from Eric and Sarah with the DIR describing the experience and the type of information that you're going to be entering to the DIR. And it's nice to hear about a lot of the changes that are going to take place this summer as well. So what we're talking about here is the platform that you're going to use to register as a contractor, register your project, and upload your certified payroll reports. And those are those documents that Eric was referring to that are the more detailed form that you'll be completing with that statement of compliance. So Surge, actually, it's an initiative, as you've heard us described so far in this webinar, directed by the California Public Utilities Commission. And the Surge portal and the entire program, it was created to help you as contractors to navigate through these compliance requirements. So to give you a place to get those training resources and online support, and then to upload the payroll, to register yourself. So it's kind of a one-stop shop for all of the resources that you're going to need. So again, it's a website and that you'll be going into for the information in terms of, and just like Eric and Sarah were talking about specific DIR training programs and user guides. Well, we have the equivalent of that on the Surge site that's going to tell you about AB 2143 and help you navigate through that, those regulatory requirements. There's also a dedicated email address that some of you may have already found if you've been into the Surge website. And so you can go ahead and direct any of your questions and requests for any additional guidance through that email address. And our team here, of which Ariana and I are a part of, will respond to you as quickly as possible. And you can also call us directly and we'll answer those questions for you over the telephone. And what we typically do is if we answer a question over the phone, we will normally follow that up with an email so that you have that in writing as well. So that'll be helpful for your paper trail. And just as we described a moment ago, Surge is its own system. So it's a compliance portal, very easy to navigate in terms of the website and being able to use those online forms to register yourself as the contractor, register the project, and then to upload the digital copies of your certified payroll reports. And again, those digital copies are that's the form that Eric was referring to, where you're going to complete that, convert it to a PDF, and then upload it. So very straightforward process. And next slide, please. So again, just illustrating the steps that were previously described. So once you have that interconnection application completed and unique number from the utility that we talked about earlier in the presentation today, you have your DIR registration number, you'll come into the Surge system and you'll register yourself as the contractor. So this is the first step in the process. And in fact, you can do this at any time. Once you have that interconnection number and you've registered with the DIR, you don't need to already have that active project in order to complete this step in the process. In fact, we highly encourage you do this as soon as possible and get that part out of the way. So again, contractors and all subcontractors are going to be required to do this. And you're only going to do it once. You'll be assigned a unique contractor identification number that you can use for all of your subsequent projects. So that would take us to step 2, which is the project registration through the Surge portal. Important distinction here. Only the prime contractors do this. So if you're going to be a prime contractor on one of the eligible projects and you're going to have lower tier subcontractors, or you're going to be a lower tier subcontractor, you will not be responsible for this task in the Surge portal. So again, primes will go through one-page online registration form for the qualifying project, meaning that's already been verified with the utility that it's eligible under 2143. Now, it's important, just like you were assigned a contractor identification number in Surge, you're going to be assigned a project identification number as well. Now, because your subcontractors are not required to register the project, they're still going to need that project identification number to eventually upload their payroll reports. Because even though they don't have to register the project, they're still bound by that requirement to complete and upload payroll reports. So the first thing you'll want to do after you register your project and receive that number is to share it with all of your lower tier subcontractors. The third step in the process, which is going to be the ongoing for the duration of the project for prime contractors and subcontractors, is to complete that payroll submission report with the statement of compliance and to upload that through the portal. So once you're in the portal, you will see those 3 options laid out exactly the way you see them described here: contractor, project, and payroll. Now, the DIR requires that monthly upload. Surge requires the biannual. That's per AB 2143. But it's very important. We highly encourage anyone working on an eligible project to upload those payroll reports to Surge more frequently. You may even want to do it on a monthly basis when you do your DIR submissions. But the statutory requirement is July 1st, December 31st, but you may upload as often as you wish. And next slide, please. So talking a little bit about penalties for non-compliance. So we heard earlier from the DIR that if there are issues with the payroll or lack of submittal, there are penalties that will be imposed. Just like I believe it was Sarah Eric talked about penalties associated with not registering with the DIR. And the same goes with not submitting payroll or underpayment. So per the California law, if a contractor does not submit copies of certified payroll by that biannual due date, meaning July 1st and December 31st, an enforcement action can proceed. Now, it's important, there's an important distinction here. we as Surge, the CPUC, are not the actual enforcement agency who are going to bring forth those penalties and identify the violation. But however, that can proceed based on various people bringing that enforcement action. So that can be done directly through the DIR. The labor commissioner, let's say that they discover through their eCPR portal that as a contractor, maybe a project was registered, but no payrolls have been submitted. Or maybe those payrolls contain underpayments for a given classification. So that can come directly through the DIR. It can also be triggered through an underpaid construction worker. Let's say you're a worker on a project and it comes to your attention that you're not being paid the proper wages for the work that you're performing. So then that can trigger an investigation and possible penalties through an administrative complaint or a civil action. It can also be triggered through the Joint Labor Management Committee via a civil action. So these are the primary means by which a violation can be identified and an action that carries penalties enforced against a contractor. And then there's some comments here as well that beginning January 1st, 2025, and this is key contractors who have a willful wage violation of the prevailing wage requirement. They will no longer be able to build facilities seeking to utilize those tariffs. So that's an important addition that's going to be enacted as of January 1st next year. And next slide, please.
Thank you so much, Sylvia, and thank you to all the presenters today. That wraps up the content for our webinar. Here's the Surge contact information. Please, as Sylvia mentioned earlier, please visit our website for more information or send us an email at info@cpucsurge.org. You can also call us on our Surge hotline at 1-800-549-2143. or also follow us on LinkedIn to get the latest updates and outreach content. So now we will turn to the Q&A session, and I will hand it off to Christina to start posing some questions to our presenters. Thank you.
Thanks, Brittany. This is just a reminder that we do ask all of the attendees to put their questions in the Q&A feature of the webinar. I noticed there's some hands raised right now. If your question maybe is too long, then we'll get to yours at the end of the webinar, but we do ask you to utilize the Q&A section first. And then just a note, some of these questions may be very project specific, and if that's the case, they may be out of the scope of this presentation. So we will provide a response to your question, but we may not get to it in the actual webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and ask the first question, and that is from Mary Rodriguez. She is asking, does the 15 kilowatt size apply to just the PV system, or do you include the energy storage system size? And I'll open that up to any of our attendees who feel like they can answer that question. Or I'm sorry, speakers.
This is Sylvia Lynn with Surge, and I can go ahead and get that discussion started. And this may be part of the question. We may need to respond to you with a follow-up in terms of more specific detail, but the 15 kilowatt would apply to the project in its entirety. So whatever part of the project, whatever scope of work, you are registering for that interconnectivity with the utility. So again, it's every component that makes up that project. And I don't know if maybe Amber, if you want to weigh in on something a little more descriptive on that, or we can also get back to you. I don't know if that summary answer helps you at all.
Hi, this is Amber. I'm going to try to unmute my colleague Sarah here. Give me 1 minute while I find her. Or Sarah, can you unmute yourself now? Or maybe one of the organizers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I
Awesome.
can. Good afternoon, everybody. First, my compliments to DIR and GCAP, a great presentation and an overview of the rules. I just wanted to quickly recap that I heard the question correctly. The question was as to a storage only project, or was it whether the 15 kilowatt exemption includes storage alone?
You know what, Sarah, let me find Mary and maybe unmute her so she is able to provide you some more background on that.
Great, thank
And
you.
if any of my Surge teammates can help with that, please jump in. Okay, Mary, I just allowed your mic to unmute, so if you would like to provide some background. It's possible that you are muted, but if we'll just allow a couple more seconds, and if we don't hear a response from Mary, then we'll move on.
This is Sarah again. Mary, if you're having trouble unmuting, I'll just do my best to answer your question as I understood it. Feel free to jump in and interrupt me if you're successful in unmuting. But what I can clarify about the NEM tariff and our net billing tariff, which also may be referred to by your utility as the solar billing plan, is that we wouldn't consider the storage as adding capacity to the renewable energy facility, because it would have to be an addition or an enhancement to that facility. So the capacity question is really focused on your renewable energy facility. And it's my understanding that storage alone, you would not be utilizing a NEM or an MBT tariff, because the state law requires facilities that have access to those tariffs. There's a prescribed set of types of renewable energy that are permissible, and storage alone is not part of that equation. Typically, a storage system alone would have a non-export agreement with the utility. But if you have questions about that more specifically, I encourage you to follow up with your utility, and I hope that clarifies, how the exemption works for prevailing wage.
Thank you for that input, Sarah. Appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. And that is from Alex. They say, question for the DIR. If a project is federally funded, does the awarding body require registering their project with the DIR? If not, how does a contractor submit certified payroll without the project assigned DIR number?
That's a bit of a complex question. When you say federally funded, I'm immediately thinking Davis-Bacon, and federal projects for public works do have their own enforcement. So I'm not quite familiar with how federal projects, I guess, keep track of their own projects. I'm sure they require some type of project registration, certified payroll records, but yeah, it's whether or not this is a public works project. And if it's a public works project, then you do have to register. The project should be registered, and then you should be reporting certified payroll records. So I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
Eric, we have some guidance on our frequently asked questions from the website that I think might be helpful for this. For anybody following along on our website, I'm looking at our frequently asked questions. I'm looking under the awarding body section. It's question 7, which I think is applicable here. It says, if an awarding body is awarded a contract directly by a federal agency, must it comply with California Public Works law? And here's the guidance that we have. It says the awarding body must pay careful attention to whether the project is administered and controlled by the federal agency, or the federal agency is only providing financial support or assistance to a project under the direction or control of a state or local agency. California's prevailing wage requirements do not apply to projects awarded by and under the complete control of the federal government. However, federally funded or assisted projects that are controlled or carried out by the awarding bodies in California, including most highway construction projects, are subject to the state's prevailing wage laws. Those projects must comply with the state requirements, including contractor project registration, certified payroll records, etc. So basically the question comes down to the federal agency's role. Are they just providing funding, or are they actually going to be in control of the project?
Thank you, Sarah and Eric. If I may add to that as well, it's also possible that if this is if the project received federal funds, and maybe it's as Sarah just described, those funds are managed and or executed by a local state agency, you may have what's called a dual funded project. But that project may fall within one of the exceptions under AB 2143, because one of those exemptions is it's already a public works project, notwithstanding AB 2143. So there's projects that are public works because they are solar, the commercial solar, but there are projects that maybe receive some type of federal funding because they are publicly funded projects. So there you're already subject to the public works requirements, but not under AB 2143, but rather under Davis-Bacon and most likely the DIR. So I hope that helps.
And just something to add as well, when it comes to the project registration, that's more the responsibility of the awarding agency. So whether or not the project is registered or not is a decision that's made before you're actually performing work and you're submitting certified payroll records.
Awesome, great. Thank you for all of that input. I am going to move on to the next question, and that is, can a contractor register a project on behalf of the awarding body?
In general, no. It should be what fits the definition of awarding agency, which is the owner of the project. So a contractor has their own responsibilities. An awarding agency, a contractor has to manage their own certified payroll records, make sure they're paying prevailing wages, following apprenticeship. The awarding agency is the agency that handles the contract, but is also monitoring all other contractors doing all those things. So unless it's just not realistic for a contractor to not only monitor themselves, but also other contractors and subcontractors.
Thank you. Okay, moving on. I believe this question was when, Sylvia, you were talking about the payroll submission process on the Surge Compliance portal. And I'm sorry, it just made me lose my place. But they were asking, how does that work if we are working on and finishing a job towards the end of June?
If you're finishing the job towards the end of June, you would submit whatever payroll that you have prior to that July 1st. You could prior to that July 1st deadline. If you do not, for the work that is completed let's say within a week or two of that July 1st, it's possible that it may carry over to that next reporting cycle, which would be December 31st. So it's really going to depend on the timing of when that work is actually completed.
I think another thing to note here is we have the payroll schedules posted on the Surge website. And so for that July 1st deadline, we are asking for certified payroll records from January 1st through, I believe, the end of May. So it would capture all of the payroll records within that time frame. And then anything performed in June would be captured in the December 31st deadline that we have later in the year.
Thank you, Christina. Yeah, that was specifically implemented in order to give that window of time to give contractors enough time to complete the certified payroll reports, to complete that administrative task.
Yes. So another question, does the prime need to register the project with Surge and the DIR?
So on the DIR side, yeah, the project registration is handled specifically by the awarding agency, which is the owner of the project. It's not handled by the prime contractors. The prime contractors have their own specific responsibilities. But when it comes to the surge, I'll let I'm not too familiar with that, so yeah.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take it. Thanks, Eric. Yeah, exactly what Eric is saying. Registering the project on the DIR is going to be the owner of the project, but on the Surge platform, you as the contractor will be registering the project. So you are the appropriate party there and participant to this that is going to be responsible for registering that project in Surge. So the short answer here, in Surge, the prime registers. In the DIR, no, that's the property owner or the project owner.
Great, thank you. Moving on to another question. This is from John. He asks, we have our payroll administered by an outside payroll company. Will their weekly payroll statements suffice for AB 2143 reporting requirements?
So for the DIR side, there are two payroll requirements. One is to furnish certified payroll records as specified in Labor Code 1776. So Labor Code 1776, basically, one that comes into play is if the Labor Commissioner's Office sends you a written request for your certified payroll records. And those certified payroll records, when you furnish them, should be on a form that represents all the criteria on 1776. The example format that we have is the A131 form. But as I said in the presentation, you don't have to restrict yourself to the A131 form. You can have your own format so long as that format matches the criteria in the A131 form or 1776. So I don't know what format you're using for your payroll administrator, but for the purposes of a written request from us, you may want to check and compare with the A131 form. And second, the electronic certified payroll records is a separate administrative duty for the DIR. You're reporting certified payroll records on a monthly basis. Basically, you're inputting this information into our system. I'm not sure about the new system coming up, but I feel like it's going to function the same. You're going to be inputting values into that system, and it's going to probably be restricted to whatever is required when you're using our electronic system. Yeah, that's it for the DIR side.
And on the Surge side, if you can transcript or have that format saved as a PDF document to upload to Surge, that's perfectly acceptable as long as it contains all of the pertinent information on a standard, as Eric described, certified payroll report. So if it has all of the same information that is required along with a statement of compliance, then you can convert that document as provided by your payroll provider to a PDF file and upload that to Surge.
Great, thank you both for that input. Another question is from Maggie, and that is asking if we handle our registration and our weekly or monthly certified payroll through the DIR, why is it necessary that we provide this to Surge as well?
I'll go ahead and address it for Surge. It's a regulatory requirement. It's pursuant to AB 2143 and the Public Utilities Code 769.2. It is a regulatory requirement, and then under the DIR, it is a DIR and labor code related requirement. So you have regulations, and one that is managed and monitored and enforced under the DIR. The other is through this Surge portal for AB 2143 compliance. So it's all based on regulation.
That's a perfect answer. Nothing to add from DIR.
Yeah, please do. Oh, I'm sorry, you said nothing to add. Okay, thank you. Okay, another question. Could you please clarify whether the contractor is allowed to submit redacted CPRs to Surge after completing the DIR upload?
Well, it depends the information that you are trying to redact, because the required information, it still follows the same requirements for a certified payroll report as what is described by the DIR on the form. So to redact too much information, then it's not going to meet the requirements of what constitutes a certified payroll report. If I could have maybe Eric or Sarah weigh in on how much information can be redacted under the labor code in order to still qualify as a certified payroll.
So I think this might offer some clarification. When contractors are entering into our current electronic format, right, they're entering information unredacted. And the reason that is because electronic certified payroll records, since Public Works is basically in the purview of the public can source the download these electronic certified payroll records. Our system has certain layers of confidentiality. So internally, I could access the full certified payroll records, but the public, the system will automatically redact it. But the original source material information that was entered was completely unredacted. So maybe the question for Surge is, I guess, like, and I'm personally not familiar. I guess on the public-facing side, would it be unredacted, or is this something that's available to the public? But for DIR, all certified payroll records are entered electronically. It's available for the public, but our system automatically redacts any sensitive information.
And on the Surge side, the Surge portal has security mechanisms in place. It is not available to the general public. Now, there's also the issue of responding to a public records request. That's something different. But someone actually from the public coming into the system, they're not going to have access to Surge. And I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Sylvia. This was sort of answered, but we can just ask it again just to provide additional clarification. Do payroll records have to go both to the DIR and Surge? or will they share once it has been uploaded to one?
And I can briefly answer that question. No, we do. It's not shared because there's separate regulatory requirements. So one is for the DIR and the other is for surge under AB 2143, and they are a separate set of requirements. So they both have to be complied with.
Okay, thank you. There is a question, how do I submit Form A1-131 on the DIR site? Can the form be submitted electronically?
So the A131 form, that's something that should be kept separate. It's a separate thing. I believe the updates that we're making to our system is to make it more accessible. So what I understand is that the new system is going to accommodate a lot of the information for the certified payroll records on A131, but right now they're pretty different. ECPRs, if you're entering them manually, are not going to have enough information that satisfies Labor Code 1776, which is why it's a separate upload. And of course, that requirement is separate too. You have to upload, every month for work that's being performed into the electronic system. The certified payroll records is more for, for enforcement purposes. If there is a matter of compliance that we need to verify, we'll send you a written request. So we expect to receive from you a form that is either the A131 form or something equivalent to it in terms of the criteria. Hopefully that answers that question, but there are two separate tasks. One is the A131 form, which we can ask for at any time after the project is complete. The other is the electronic certified payroll records, which is something that you're doing administrative every month.
Great, thank you. Another quick question, are there any fees for using Surge as a subcontractor?
No, there are no fees associated with Surge. The only fee you're going to incur is when you register as a contractor with the DIR, and that's going to be the registration fee. Registering in Surge does not trigger any fees at all.
Okay, great, thank you. Another question, will we be required to comply with DAS 140 and 142 requirement?
So AB 2143 makes these projects public work projects, and then public works projects have apprenticeship requirements, which include those forms. The labor code those are codified in is 1777.5. Apprenticeship requirements do apply to projects that are considered public works projects.
Thank you. Another question, are small subcontractor owners, if they work on the installation themselves, required to pay themselves prevailing wages and include those wages as part of the certified reports?
So the main question we're asking is, does Public Works apply? Then yes, you should be paying yourself prevailing wage if you're performing that work. So it doesn't matter how small your subcontract is. It's really about the total contract, the total project cost as well. So as long as Public Works applies, then you do have to pay yourself prevailing wage, and you do have to report it. So as long as you're performing work on that project, make sure you're paying yourself correctly. You're using the right classification. You research your wage determination as well. That's why you have those resources: the Office of Policy Research and Legislation, the phone number, and the email. If you have any questions, definitely reach out to them.
Great, thank you. Another question, will contractors be required to hire apprentices on projects that are applicable to AB 2143?
Sure. So this is same as the DS 14142 question, which is that, and if no one's familiar, those are apprenticeship forms that AB 2143 makes these public works projects, which carry apprenticeship requirements.
Thank you. Another question, if the solar system was non-export, would AB 2143 still comply?
I will defer here to Amber and Sarah with CPUC. Sarah, I believe, oh, I'm sorry, Tori maybe wants to weigh in on this from CPUC. I believe this was touched on in one of the earlier questions as well on the export.
This is Sarah Lehrhaupt at the PUC. Yes, in our first response, we covered this. If you have a non-export system, then you're not using the net energy metering or net billing tariff.
Yeah, and this is Tori. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
I was just
Yes.
gonna echo. I was just gonna echo what Sarah just said. The regulations here, the requirements here are limited to only those tariffs that are in, that are specified under the NBT or net energy metering. So if you're using a Rule 21 non-export tariff, it's not. It doesn't have to comply with these requirements.
Great, thank you, Tori. Another question, what payroll submission responsibility does a contractor have in Surge if the subcontractor is performing all of the public work?
I will defer to Ariana Fernandez to answer that question from our Surge team.
Ariana, I think you're muted.
Thank you, yes. If you are a prime contractor and you are subbing out the work to all of your lower tiers, in Surge, you will still be required to register your project and provide them with that PIN number, the project identification number. If you're not self-performing any work, then you wouldn't have any certified payrolls to submit, and that responsibility would go to your subcontractors.
Great, thank you, Ariana. Just give me a moment as I go through some of these questions. Another question, what is the timeline the IOUs are required to adhere to in regards to the first and last steps of the process?
I can attempt to answer that question. I hope I have sufficient information to answer it to your satisfaction. So the timeline, beginning with, of course, where the contractor goes to the utility for the interconnection application. So that obviously needs to be performed before the construction actually starts. And then as is the case with the disclosure form and all of the information in preparation for, number one, uploading the payroll documents and AB 2143 compliance. The only timeline then that is ongoing and not part of what we call that pre-construction phase would be just ensuring compliance with with AB 2143 certified payroll submission to Surge. So that is something that the utility would monitor via Surge on an ongoing basis through project completion.
Great, thank you. I'm not sure if anyone else has anything to add here. If not, I'll move on to another question. Another question, what if the property owner opts not to participate in the net energy metering and simply chooses to forgo it?
Well, projects that are not subject to net energy metering would not fall within the requirements of AB 2143. I don't know if there's anything that Tori or Amber or Sarah would like to add to that, but the general rule would be if you're not receiving the tariff, the NEM, then it's not subject to AB 2143.
Yeah, Sylvia, this is Tori. I couldn't have said it better. So if you're not attempting to interconnect under these tariffs, you're not obliged to comply with the requirements.
Great, thank you, both Tori and Sylvia, for that.
Christina?
Yeah.
We're at 10 minutes, so I just wanted to remind everybody about there's like a lot of questions that are coming through. Serge will prepare a Q&A document for all the questions that are asked at today's webinar, even though you don't see them on the thread. If we did not get to your question by the end of the webinar at 1:30, we will be preparing a Q&A document. So just wanted to let everybody know that we will be responding to your questions. It's just going to take a little time just because of the amount of questions that we are asked. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Brittany. Okay, moving on to another question from John. You've said that the contractor registers in Surge and the project owner registers with the DIR. Does this mean that the contractor doesn't register with the DIR, only with Surge?
The contractor will perform a contractor registration with the DIR and contractor registration in Surge. The contractor does not register the project on the DIR, but if you are a prime contractor, you will register on Surge. So Surge will always involve the contractors when it comes to project registration. So Surge contractors register, project gets registered, but the project is registered by the prime contractor in Surge. On the DIR side, the contractor doesn't perform the project registration, only the individual contractor registration portion.
Yeah, so clarifying for DIR that, yeah, for us, as a contractor, you need to register yourself as a public works contractor. This is what we were talking about. It follows the fiscal year. There is a $400 registration fee. It's going to give you a contractor registration number. And it's really important to have that before doing any work on projects that are considered public works projects, because working on projects without an active registration can result in you being assessed penalties. So it's certainly very important. I'm glad this question was asked.
Great, thank you both Sylvia and Sarah for that. Another question, how can a contractor know if their subcontractor is compliant?
So there's a concept that we have in general public works projects. It's called cognizance. And part of that cognizance is we want to make sure that everyone's paid correctly. So not only is the contractor monitoring their own payroll records, right? The awarding agency is monitoring the payroll records of the other contractors, of all the contractors on the project. So basically, when it comes to contractors and subcontractors, they're both jointly and severally liable. So it's in your best interest as a prime contractor hiring other contractors to make sure that your subcontractors are following the prevailing wage requirements, because failure to do so can essentially loop you in, because you would also be tied to any civil wage or penalty assessment that that is issued for any possible violations that your subcontractor committed. So basically, long story short is everyone's on the hook. So you want to make sure that you're monitoring all your subcontractors to avoid any types of assessments being issued, because violations can happen whether they're intentional or unintentional. So it's in your best interest to monitor those certified payroll records. And electronic certified payroll records, though they're very brief, they give you a lot of initial information. You can see whether or not there are apprentices on the project. If there aren't, then you can start asking questions. Have you requested apprentices or stuff like that? Are you paying the correct rates? Are you using the correct classifications? That is all on the face of the certified payroll records. So that is, something that you want to incorporate in your general procedures for as a prime contractor, because if they fail your subcontractors, then you could be on the hook for penalties on a civil wage penalty assessment.
Another tool that you can use, I think it was great that Eric pointed out that, yes, you can use the electronic certified payroll search engine on the DIR. That's available from our website on the Public Works website. But earlier in the presentation, we talked about how you can search for registered public works projects. You can also search for registered public works contractors. We have a contractor registration search engine where you can search by contractor name or CSLB number or their registration number if they know it. So you, as a prime contractor, you should search for your subcontractors, make sure they have an active registration before they start working on your project.
Great, thanks so much for all that input. Sort of in relation to subcontractor compliance, there's another question that's asking, can we access our subcontractor submissions on Surge or the DIR?
So what Sarah said, right? We have that search function that's available to the public. That's the public facing site. So basically, if you enter your certified payroll records, you should be able to see them, but you have the same, even though you're the one who entered the record into our electronic system for DIR, you have the same restrictions as someone from the public. So you'll see your certified payroll records entered, but you won't see the more sensitive information like the worker's name, the address, any other information that would be interpreted as confidential, but you can still see the general redacted certified payroll records right after it's entered. That's for the DIR.
And on Surge, you will be able to know, you'll be given information with regard to if your subcontractors are in compliance. And our Surge resources, and we continually add to the resources and provide additional information. If it's not already out there, we will have information as to specifically how information can be accessed. So please continue to check the Surge website and the portal.
Great, thank you. Another question, we do have, it looks like about 4 minutes left for the Q&A. When the payroll is submitted, will there be an ID number that the contractor needs to associate so DIR knows which project the payroll is for?
Yes,
and so that would be.
Oh, jinx.
Okay.
Yes, that's the project ID. It's generated when the awarding body registers the project. It's about 5 or 6 numbers long. You use the DIR project ID when you upload electronic certified payroll records to associate your records with the project.
And that's more reason to attend our training functions that we have set up, the ones that we explain were scheduled in June and July, because you can actually see Dana and Amaris go over our search function, after you enter your certified payroll records, what information is available that you can search for. And one of those is your 6-digit DIR project ID.
Great, thank you. Another question, will the project owner register the project on DIR as a public work?
Yes, so basically the PwC 100, that's the awarding agency responsibility to report to basically register any project. So if it's registered on the the PwC 100, the assumption is that it is a public works project because the awarding agency should have done the research, should have the confirmation of coverage that it is a public works project.
Great, thank you. Another, probably our last question for today's Q&A portion. Like Brittany mentioned, we will be posting a document with all of the questions asked today with answers. And we'll be sure to send that out to attendees, and it'll also be posted on the Surge website. Last question, is PTO contingent on payroll records being verified?
And I can certainly start that conversation here. If the CPUC has any additional information to add. And yes, that it would be contingent upon that anything associated with the tariff would be associated with compliance of AB 2143, which means timely submission of the payroll information and payment of prevailing wage.
Great. Thanks so much, Sylvia. Brittany, did you want to close this out or did you want to do one more question?
Let's just do one more question real quick and then we can close it out after that.
Okay, perfect. Let's see. Once the prime contractor registers in Surge as a sub, will we be able to find the project and connect to upload our CPRs?
I can go ahead and take that one. Once the project is registered by the prime in Surge, they're going to receive that project identification number, the PIN number. So if you're a subcontractor, make sure to get that PIN number from your prime, and vice versa. If you're a prime, be sure to share that PIN number with all of your subs so they can upload the payrolls.
Thank you so much, Ariana, and thank you, Christina, for handling all of the Q&A. So we're going to be wrapping up this presentation. The webinar recording will be available as well as the presentation slides. I just wanted to thank DIR and the Labor Commissioner's Office for being here today, as well as Surge and also our CPUC representatives. So thank you so much. If you have any questions, I'm just going to flash the contact us page again. Please email us at info@cpucsurge.org. And also you can call us at 1-800-549-2143. Thank you so much, everyone, for your attendance. And we'll end the call right now. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending, everyone. Have a good day.